Okay, so this is Women of the Tanakh number 6. Now, I wanted to talk about two characters, but I'm not sure if we're going to get to the second one. We may or may not. If we don't, we'll combine it with another one, because Hulda is another one of the Nevi'ot who is lesser known, and there's only a little bit about her. It's interesting. I thought we could tack it on to Devorah, but if we find that with Devorah we don't have, we have too much material and we don't have enough leftover time, then we will we'll leave Hulda for another time. So the story of Devorah happens in Book of Shoftim. The Book of Shoftim is, if those of you who might remember, if you took classes in Navi in school, or you learned Navi, you've learned the Book of Shoftim. The Book of Shoftim is an interesting book that has a lot of vignettes. There's a lot of little mini stories in the Book of Shoftim. It's not like many of the other books of Tanakh where there's an ongoing story, but there are stories of a chapter or two about a certain shofet, a certain leader that lived at a certain time and dealt with certain problems, and then they die, and then the Jews sort of like wallow in a void of spiritual leadership for a while, and then another shofet will come. So that's why it says in the beginning, but after Yehuda died, the people of Israel again did what was evil from Hashem's perspective. Okay, the translation is a little bizarre, but this was the best that I could find for a cut and paste online. So after Ehud was a very influential and significant shofet towards the beginning of the Book of Shoftim. After he died, as the pattern was, the people backslide into evil. They backslide into idolatry, into immorality, into all these problems as soon as they don't have a spiritual leader. And then what happens is, Hashem always creates problems for them. In other words, whenever the Jews fall off of the way of Hashem, whenever they fall out of observing the Torah, Hashem always responds by creating political problems for them and political persecution. And this political persecution is supposed to wake them up to do teshuvah. So who is it? This time it's somebody named Yavin, the king of Canaan. He ruled from Chatzor, and the commander of his army was Sisra, who lived in Charoshet HaGoyim. These are just details, historical details. Now the people cried out to Hashem because he had 900 iron chariots, and for 20 years he cruelly oppressed the people of Israel. So basically, they were in a lot of trouble. They were oppressed, they were persecuted by a very powerful enemy, and by saying that he had 900 chariots, that's a way of saying there was no way that they could repel this enemy. They couldn't just get together and have a rebellion. They wouldn't succeed. From a political standpoint, it wasn't feasible for them to succeed. So, what happens is that in every story in the Book of Shoftim, there's a similar pattern, which is the Jews stop observing the Torah, they start becoming idolaters, then they have all kinds of problems, and then they cry out to Hashem, and Hashem provides them with a leader who first helps them to return to the Torah, and first helps them to return to God, first strengthens them spiritually, and then leads them to conquer their enemies and become independent again. That is the pattern that we see throughout the Book of Shoftim. Okay? So let's see what happens in this story. Now Devorah, a female prophet, the wife of Lapidot, was judging Israel at that time. So what's very interesting right away is what? She's a girl. That's unusual for the Jewish people in history to have a woman leader as the main leader. She's the main leader of the Jewish people at this time. She's the spiritual leader. She's judging Israel. That doesn't mean she's being judgmental. It means that she is the judge. She's the person who is teaching them. She's the person who is, when they have disputes or arguments or questions, she's the address that they come to resolve them, to give them answers to their questions. So essentially, in a way, she's serving like the chief rabbi or something of Israel. She's the person that everybody comes to with their questions. And it's a female. Very unusual in this context, obviously, right? It's not very common to find a female leader of that stature. Although, what we learned last week was that Miriam was a person like that. But she mainly focused on the women. Devorah is someone who is even there for the men. Now, what we're going to notice in this story is that everything, and this is why it's like an amazing story for women to learn, and from a, you could say a feminist perspective, but we're not getting into any political agendas here. We're not into that. But looking at it from a female perspective, this is a story where every character of significance, basically, who makes anything happen in the story, is a female. Okay? And the men, actually, are essentially manipulated by or directed by women in the story, which makes it really a girl's story, a female story. We're going to see. So, what happens in the beginning is Devorah is teaching everybody. Now, she used to sit under Devorah's palm tree, so she even had a palm tree named after her. She was so famous. And And that was between Ramah and Bet El in the hills of Ephraim. And the people of Israel would come to her for judgment. Now, just like Moshe Rabbeinu used to sit in one place. If you remember back to the book of Shemot in the beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu would sit from day to night, and everybody would come to him. Min haboker ad ha'arev, from the morning till the evening, he was the person that they would come to. So in the same way, everyone's coming to Devorah. She's like the Moshe Rabbeinu of her time. And what does she do? She sends for Barak, not Barack Obama, because nobody would send for him. He's not going to help the Jewish people. She sent for Barak ben Avinoam, who had potential to help the Jewish people. And this Barak was from Kedesh and Naphtali, and said to him, Hashem has given you this order. Go march to Mount Tabor. Take with you 10,000 men from the people of Naphtali and Zebulun. And I will cause Sisera, the commander of Yavin's army, to encounter you at the Kishon River with his chariots and troops, and I will hand him over to you. So she tells, who is the boss here? Devorah is the boss, right? She sends a messenger to the general of the army, who is sitting around apparently doing nothing because they're persecuted. They're not fighting for themselves right now. He's at a loss of what to do. And she sends a message to the general. She's the commander-in-chief, basically, okay? She sends a message to the general and says, I want you to gather troops, mobilize your troops, and you're going to go, and Yavin, the king of Canaan, is going to come down, and you're going to defeat him. That's what Hashem says. You have to go do it. Okay? So it's very interesting. Not only is she the spiritual leader, but she's the commander-in-chief, basically. She's telling the generals what to do. Now, what's significant about this also is that Devorah it first mentions that everybody was coming to her, right? All of Israel was coming to her for judgment. That means what about the Jewish people? That there was a spiritual reawakening. The people had fallen off of the Torah. How many people are flocking to rabbis today to ask them questions? I don't mean in your personal immediate circle of religious, friends and stuff like that. I mean out in the Jewish world. Not that many people, right? It's not like all Jews in the world are just like magnets drawn to the spiritual leaders trying to find out how to live their lives and things like that. We wish that was the case. It is not. So the fact that it's saying Devorah is the magnet, she's the one, everybody's coming. Kol Yisrael, all of the Jews are coming up to her. La Mishpat, they want to be on the right track. They want to hear what she has to say. They want her to make the decisions for them. They want her to give them the answers to their questions. They want her to resolve their disputes. That means that they're recognizing the prophet of Hashem as the real leader. Once they do that, that means that they're really following the path of Hashem. And once they're following the path of Hashem, now Hashem sends a message to Devorah, mobilize the troops, the Jews are going to be able to regain their autonomy again. This is what happens in the book of Shoftim. The Jews sink low. The spiritual leader first has to get them back on the right track. Hashem's not going to help the Jews as long as they're worshiping idols. First they have to come back to the Torah. Who brings them back to the Torah? It's Devorah this time who does it. She brings them back to the Torah, and once they're on the right path, she gives the order. What does Barak say? Barak answered her, if you go with me, I'll go. But if you don't go with me, I'm not going to go. Is Barak a strong character? What kind of a manly dude would say that?
He's scared.
Right? Well, what kind of a manly general would say, so what is it really trying to show us about the male leadership of the time? They're very weak. He's not willing to go on his own. He wants Devorah to go with him. Devorah is a girl, right? So we're not putting down girls, but the point is, in that society, in that social, could you imagine today even? Let's say some top general says, I'm going to go out to war, but only if my mommy comes. I'll only go if my mom. What do you mean you only go if your mom comes? What kind of is that the person that you want defending you and on the front lines? That's the type of leader? No. You want somebody strong who says, yeah, we're going to take them, we're going to go, and we're going to defeat the enemy. So it makes him look like, please forgive the word, a sissy basically. Right? He doesn't want to go without his mommy. He doesn't want to go without Devorah. Devorah is like the mother of Israel. Later on she says, Ad shakamti em b'Yisrael. I was like the mother to the Jewish people. He wants his mother to go with him to war. That doesn't inspire confidence. Let's say that much, right? Doesn't inspire confidence. Doesn't seem like someone who's really going to be an impressive opponent against Yavin on the battlefield defending the Jewish people. So what happens next? She says to him, okay, yes, I will gladly go with you, but the way you are doing it will bring you no glory because Hashem will hand Sisera over to a woman. Meaning, you're not going to get the credit for this because you don't have confidence and trust in Hashem to go out on your own and lead the army and you're dependent on me. Hashem is going to hand Sisera over to a woman. Who is Devorah talking about? Does anybody know? Does she mean that Hashem's going to hand Sisera over to her? It's really Yael, if you know the end of the story, right? It's really Yael who's going to be the one. But the point is, because Sisera, in other words, if Barak had said, okay, I'm going to fulfill the word of Hashem, I'm going to do it, I got the orders from on high, I'm going to follow through, I'm going to mobilize my men, we're going to go fight, then he might have been able to be the one to conquer the enemy, and then he would have had the glory and he would have been recognized as the leader. But instead he said, no, I need my mommy to go with me. Since you said I need my mommy to go with me, therefore, okay, then another female is going to be the one. This is going to be a women's war. The women are going to win this war, and you are not going to get the glory. That's what Devorah says. So, what happens? Devorah set out and went with Barak to Kedesh. Barak summoned Zvulun and Naphtali. 10,000 men follow him, and Devorah went up with him. That's in verse 10, right? So they all go up, Devorah goes with him. And now it talks about Chever HaKeni. It talks about Chever HaKeni because pretty soon we're going to find out about the wife of Chever HaKeni, which is Yael. Okay. So anyway, Sisera rallies the chariots. They go out to war. Devorah says to Barak, get going! This is the day when Hashem will hand Sisera over to you. Hashem has gone out ahead of you. In other words, she's the one who's motivating him. He's sitting around saying, I want to wait till, Devorah says to go because I'm really afraid that I'm going to, take any risks here. I might end up losing the battle. She says, get up and go. Go fight. He says, okay. Did you ever hear the story about the mother comes and knocks on the door. Her son is in bed. The son is in bed. She knocks on the door and says, you need to get up. It's time to go to school. And the son says, no, I don't want to go to school. I hate school. The mom says, no, you have to go to school. He says, no, the kids hate me. Nobody likes me. I can't stand going. She says, but you have to go. You're the principal. Right? So that's what happens here, right? Devorah says, you have to go. You're the general. Move, go, fight. So he goes and he fights. And what happens? Barak pursues the chariots, but Sisera gets off of his chariot and he runs away on foot. It's much harder to find somebody on foot. If you see a big chariot, moving along, you can trail it, you can chase. But when somebody runs away on foot, it's a lot harder to locate them, right? There's no way to find them. He runs off into wherever. So meanwhile, it mentions that Sisera ran on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Chever the Keni, because there was peace between Yavin, the king of Chatzor, and the family of Chever the Keni. Chever the Keni was actually related to Moshe Rabbeinu. These were the descendants of Yitro. Yitro is the father-in-law of Moshe. These are his descendants. They lived in Israel together with the Jews. And yet they had a treaty with Yavin. They had a treaty with the Canaanite king. Because they weren't Jewish, right? But they were related to Moshe by marriage, because Moshe's in-laws, family, basically moved to Israel. So what happens, it's very interesting. Obviously, this guy Chever HaKeni, must have been a really significant person. Because how would you find this guy's house? It's not like he lived on some cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, Chever HaKeni was a really significant person who probably had some huge farm or huge fields, an important person. You don't have a treaty with the king unless you're an important person, right? Why would you have a treaty with the king, Yavin, unless he was a very powerful person? So this Chever HaKeni, who is the husband of Yael, is obviously some major political figure. He's not just some guy off the street. A guy off the street, I don't have any alliances or treaties with any kings. A regular person doesn't have that. Only an important person has that. So the fact that it mentions that he had a treaty with Yavin means he's a known personality. He's an important person. He has an alliance of some sort with Yavin, even though it might be an alliance of convenience. Really, he might be on the Jews' side. In other words, Chever HaKeni is someone who's related to Moshe Rabbeinu's family. He's going to have sympathy for the Jews. But on the other hand, political expediency says you have to have a treaty with whoever the king is who's in charge of your territory. You don't want to be on bad terms with him. So, for example, if your county executive is a Democrat and you want to do a lot of business in the county, you might want to register as a Democrat just so that you can get things done. That's what I know a lot of people, they do that. I had my government teacher in undergraduate used to say, when I lived in one neighborhood, I registered as a Republican because I wanted my garbage picked up. And then when I lived in another neighborhood, I registered as a Democrat because I wanted my garbage picked up. But the idea was, you have to be on good terms with whoever's running things. Depending on the circumstances. So what happened here was Chever had a treaty with Yavin. Obviously, Chever must have been a very, very significant person, not just a regular average person. And he was a known address. And so Sisera runs to he thinks he's going to get political asylum there. And of course, who greets him? Yael. And what nicer thing to do than to greet and say, "Come in, my lord, stay here with me and don't be afraid." She went to her tent, she covered him with a blanket, and he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, I'm thirsty." Fair request, he's been running, he needs water. She opened a goatskin of milk and gave him some drink and covered him up again. Now let me ask you, what is the image of giving milk, a woman giving milk? It's so motherly, isn't it? It's so maternal, right? So there's something nurturing about Yael. She's this motherly figure. She's a very feminine, it's very feminine to give milk, right? Even though she's giving it from a goatskin. She's not nursing him, but the idea of giving milk, feeding milk to a child, to a son, well, it's very motherly. So we see motherly figures here, right? Devorah is a motherly figure, and later on she says, Ad shekamti em b'Yisrael, I was a mother in Israel. And Yael is very motherly. How do we see her motherhood? Because she's giving milk. Milk is what mothers give. Of course, she's a mother that we, unfortunately, she's like the a kind of a nightmarish mother, because then as soon as he falls asleep, she hammers a stake through his head, which is not exactly what we would want mothers to do, although sometimes we hear these horrible things about mothers, killing their children and things like that, unfortunately. Very tragic. But Yael, of course, kills him. And this is a defining moment for Hever and Yael. You have to realize how brave she is, because they are taking sides in a major conflict here, right? They had an alliance, a treaty with Yavin, because that was what was expedient. But really, who is their heart with? Their heart is with the Jewish people. So now they have an opportunity to help the Jews overthrow the persecution of Yavin. And at that moment, in a very motherly way, she tucks him into bed. Isn't that nice? And she gives him some milk. It's so sweet. How motherly. And then as soon as she falls asleep, but it says in Shirat Devorah later, cradled between her legs, he falls asleep. Oh, he's sleeping so peacefully. And then she goes and gets power. She goes and gets tools, a hammer and a stake to kill him. A very non-feminine type of thing to do, isn't it? Stereotypically, I'm saying, okay? Stereotypically. I'm not, we don't have to buy into these stereotypes, but I'm saying, in terms of the imagery that we think of, if I were to say, is this a feminine image or a masculine image? Taking a hammer and taking a nail and banging it through someone's head, you probably wouldn't say it's a feminine image if you weren't thinking of Yael. Whereas covering somebody with a blanket, putting their head to rest on your knees and giving them milk, it's very motherly, right? So Yael is, on one hand, a very motherly person, very maternal towards Sisera, but then she turns into a very masculine, so to speak. In other words, aggressive personality, kills him. And then when Barak shows up, Yael goes out to meet him and say, "Come up, we'll show you the man you're looking for. Let me introduce you to somebody." Sisera, the man you're looking for. Of course, she sees that he's dead, and that was the day that they overthrew Yavin. So it's very interesting. So far we see two women are instrumental in bringing down Yavin, the king of Canaan. One is Devorah, who is the one who, first of all, sparks this spiritual reawakening of the Jewish people. Second of all, commands Barak to go out to war and stays with him, holds his hand through the war. And then, on the receiving end, Yael, who's also this very maternal figure, but has a very decisive commitment to the Jewish welfare. Even though she had an alliance and a treaty with Yavin, it was only a treaty of expedience. They weren't really committed to them. Really, they were committed to the Jewish people deep down inside. So when she had an opportunity, she killed him. In fact, she used her motherliness as a lure, as a way to get him in the door, so she could kill him. Very nice. Now, what happens on the next side of the page is we have Shirat Devorah. There are a couple of highlights in the Song of Devorah that are worth taking a look at. Now, obviously, Shirat Devorah is actually a really long song. If you look at the number of psukim, it's quite long. But we're not going to go through every word of it. But on that day, Devorah and Barak, the son of Avinoam, sang this song. So you see that Devorah comes first, right? And I highlighted some important things that I thought were important. Not everything's important in it, obviously, but I'm just saying some things that I wanted to emphasize, I should say. She says, When leaders in Israel dedicate themselves and the people volunteer, you should all bless Hashem. Look at what the people were able to do here by following Hashem. Hashem, when you went out from Seir, this is verse 4. When you marched out from the fields of Edom, the earth quaked and the sky shook. The clouds poured down torrents. The mountains melted at the presence of Hashem at Sinai, before Hashem, the God of Israel. She's talking about the revelation at Sinai. What was it that she did to get the Jews worthy, to lift the Jews up, to make them worthy of Hashem's intervention? It was bringing them back to the Torah, right? She brought them back to the Torah. So she's first talking about the giving of the Torah. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anat, in the days of Yael. She refers to this period of time as the days of Yael. Yael obviously was a historical figure of great importance, not just in the story, but she must have been someone everybody knew. The main roads were deserted. Travelers walked the byways. The rulers ceased in Israel. They ceased. Actually, it's interesting because the language is wrong. The translation is wrong. It's Ad Shekamti. It should be until I arose. Devorah arose a mother in Israel. Not until you arose. Until I arose. In other words, she says about herself that there were no leaders until I rose up as a mother in Israel. I was the one who brought them back to the Torah. Why were the roads desolate? Because the persecution was so great, people were afraid to walk on the streets. They were being harassed. There was so much anti-Semitism, so much oppression, they were afraid to walk on the streets. And then she goes on to talk more about how they used to go to the water holes and have to be afraid of the archers shooting at them when they would go just to get water. Then in the bold it says, "Awake, awake, Devorah! Awake, awake! Break into song! Arise, Barak! Lead away your captive, son of Avinoam." So Devorah has to awaken herself again. And the emphasis here is, actually Rashi says, the Chazal say, quoting what the Chazal say, that Devorah praised herself by saying, things were terrible until I came along. But when I came along, everything was great. So that was kind of, sounded a little bit haughty from her to say that. So she lost her divine inspiration for a moment. And that's why she said, wake up! She had to reawaken her divine inspiration because for a short time, she lost sight of her humility, let's say, and started speaking highly of herself. Now at the end, what does it say? At the end of this page, Yael will be blessed more than all women. The wife of Heber the Keni will be blessed more than any woman in the tent. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In an elegant bowl, she brought him curds. So that means she brought him, some kind of cream. Okay? Now, that's describing Yael is going to be more blessed than any woman because look what she did. She took advantage of the situation. She took a tent peg in her left hand and a workman's hammer in her right. With the hammer, she struck Sisera, pierced his skull, and shattered him. I mean, she's talking about these gory things. In one pasuk, she's talking about what a sweet, nice lady Yael is. He asked only for water. She brought him milk. How nurturing, how kind. And then she took in her hands a hammer and a nail and killed him.
And she wasn't Jewish, right?
She wasn't Jewish. Yael was not Jewish. Now, you might think, okay, those are two maternal figures in the story, but actually there's another maternal figure in the story. And when you see the theme, that the theme is really the feminine theme of the story, and it's about mothers, it's about mother figures making things happen, look at what's described at the end of the story. And this is a famous scene. And on the surface, this scene has nothing to do with the story. But look, it says, Sisera's mother looks out the window. Why are we talking about Sisera's mother? Who cares about Sisera's mother? Who knows who Sisera's mother is? We never heard about her before. Why is she in the story? Peering through the lattice, she wonders, why is his chariot so long in coming? Like a good Jewish mother would do, worrying about where her son is. Why is he not home? There used to be these commercials on, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your child is? Yeah. I don't think they have that anymore because they've already given up. Nobody knows where the children are. But it used to make sense to have that. So Sisera's mother's waiting. Where's the wisest of her ladies? Answer her. And she repeats it to herself. Oh, it must be that they're plundering and raping a lot of women. Isn't that very comforting? They're collecting, dividing the spoil. A girl, 2 girls for every warrior. For Sisera, booty of dyed clothing, a plunder of colorfully embroidered garments, 2 embroidered scarves for every soldier's neck. Isn't it nice to think about raping and pillaging the enemy? It's so comforting. What a proud mother she must be. Now, that's what she's worried about. She's comforting herself, saying, oh, he must be taking a really long time to rape and pillage. That's why it's taking him, that's why he's delayed in getting home for dinner.
Wait, so why is she in the story?
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But isn't it interesting that she is? Yeah. And so, of course, what's the truth? He's really dead. And does she know that he's dead? Really, she does. really she does know, because she's just rationalizing to herself. In other words, everybody is telling her things, what she wants to hear, comforting her. Oh, I'm sure he's just taking a long time because, he's raping and pillaging more people, and it's just taking a really, longer than he expected. He's, of course, coming home. That's what she's telling herself. And the actual language is Vatiyabev em Sisra, that she cried. She's crying, right? She's whimpering. It doesn't say that in the English here. I don't know why they left that out. She's whimpering. Okay, she's whimpering as she looks, crying, because deep down inside, she realizes that everything that she's describing about how he's bringing cloths, and he's bringing scarves, and he's going to bring women, and he's going to bring this, all of it is made up. It's all not true. Really, she has a sinking feeling, he's never going to come back. But what do you see is, by bringing the mother of Sisra into the story, we bring in the idea of motherhood into the story. In other words, the whole purpose of the Navi here is to focus on the female characters involved in making this happen. So just like on the winning side, so to speak, what zeroed in on is Yael and Devorah, the female characters. So when it comes to the losing side, Sisra's mother is going to be the focus, because we're looking at maternal characters. We're looking at Devorah, the mother of the Jewish people. We're looking at Yael, whose maternal instinct or maternal quality is what allows her to take advantage of Sisra and kill him. And then we look at the mother of Sisra. Everything is about motherhood here. Okay, it's showing that what we have here, especially on the Jewish side, is a lack of male leadership. Where is Chever? Why is his wife at home killing people? Why is his wife the one taking the initiative here? Because it's trying to show you that the people who were taking initiative at this time were the women. The men weren't taking initiative. Even Barak himself, who wins the war technically he wins the war, isn't able to do it on his own without the support of a woman. And so on Sisra's side, who is waiting for him to come home? Who is the one who really has to absorb the calamity, the loss, the significance of the loss of Sisra? It's his mom. What did you want to say? Yeah, so so it's emphasizing it because it wants to say motherhood is the theme here. Women's involvement is the theme here. So it's like the most feminine story in the Tanakh, because it's a story where all the key players that are zeroed in on are women. Both Devorah is the inspiration for the battle, Yael is the one who kills him, and then the mother of Sisra is the one who basically reacts or absorbs the aftershock of the death of Sisra. It doesn't talk about his soldiers, it doesn't talk about the men of Canaan crying or feeling despondent because they lost the war. It talks about the mother of Sisra. So it's about mothers against mothers here. Okay, so that's the theme. The theme is the femininity. Now you can look at that as a great credit to the women of this time, that they reached such spiritual heights that they were providing leadership. There's also somewhat of a veiled critique of the men. Where are the men that usually are the ones running things in the Jewish community? Obviously they were not fulfilling their job to this extent that they normally should. This was the beginning of Jewish mothers who, take care of everything for their sons and, are really the ones who are managing all of the affairs behind the scene. That's what happens here. It's all about the women running things. Now, there are two, I put here as sort of an addendum to the story, the very famous question that's asked by the rabbis of how could Devorah be a judge? Do you see any judges today that are women? I'm not talking about Judge Judy. I mean, judges of the rabbinic judges, Torah judges. Have you ever gone to a bet din and seen a woman being the judge? It doesn't happen today, right? You don't have female judges in a bet din. So how could Devorah be a judge? Is a question that is raised by Tosafot in the Talmud, and he gives a couple of answers to what seems to be a problem. The first answer is the most shocking of all. A woman may judge. Just because she can't be a witness, we know that women can't be a witness according to halakha, doesn't mean she can't judge. Because she's not disqualified from being a witness, she's just not included in being a witness. She's not one of the people who is included in the rule of witnessing, but that doesn't mean she can't be a judge. That's one opinion. The other opinion that's given is, it was only an emergency basis, meaning the situation had deteriorated to such a level that we had to allow women to take over, because there were no men judges who were qualified. The third answer is, she wasn't really judging in a formal way. She was just teaching them the Torah. Sometimes to judge means to teach the Torah. Another answer that he gives is that there is a halakha that you can actually accept any judge upon yourself. You can accept even a judge that's not qualified if you both agree. In other words, if both parties, let's say you have two litigants, and you want a certain bet din or a certain judge to be the to arbiter between, to do the arbitration between the two parties, they can accept anybody as an arbiter, even if the person's not qualified, even if he's related to one of them, even if he's whatever the standard is. If they both agree, that's fine. In monetary issues, you can agree on whatever you want. So, because the Jewish people recognized her high spiritual stature, they accepted her as their leader. She didn't impose on them, I'm going to be in charge, I'm going to boss you around, I'm going to tell you what to do. They accepted her because they saw her great spiritual stature. So these are some of the explanations that are given. But what you do see about Devorah is that she's somebody who not only is a prophetess, which means that, and not only somebody who obviously knows the Torah very well, was capable of teaching the Torah to the entire Jewish people, was capable of leading the Jewish people spiritually, but she's also somebody who essentially is directing the political affairs of the Jewish people. So she really was the leader of the entire Am Yisrael at that time. Even Barak listens to her. She's not listening to anybody but Hashem. And that really says something about her greatness. She was the equivalent of a Torah leader, a female Torah leader. And it's not only, obviously, on her own merit, she would have been great, but because this was a time where obviously the male leadership was not functioning to its full extent, there was nobody, even when she tried to empower Barak, and she said, go, fight the war. No, I want you to come with me. She was such a great figure at the time that even the male leaders who would have been leaders, who would have been able to go out and establish a name for themselves, felt dependent upon her and wouldn't move without her coming with them. So it's amazing what kind of a figure she must have been. Okay? Now we do have a little bit of time to look at another lesser known Nevi'ah, which is Hulda. Now Hulda and Devorah both have the distinction of having names that are the Talmud says are not the nicest names, because a Devorah is a bee and a Hulda is a weasel. Yeah, so it's not that I bet somebody named Hulda. Some people do. Mm-hmm.
Is Hulda the same thing?
Maybe it comes from that. It could be. Hulda could be. It's a pretty ugly name, or it's a pretty ugly animal after which to name a person.
But there are a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of names that people use. I don't want to comment on it because you're inevitably going to hurt feelings. But there are names that it's very subjective, I guess, because there are names out there that sometimes you hear them and you're like, wow, that's a really ugly name. But obviously somebody thought it was a really good name because they named their kids, this name. They must have thought it was a nice name.
Come on, I don't think Devorah is such a bad name.
That's not such a bad name, but also, it means a bee. So from the meaning, it's not so bad. A weasel may be a little bit less illustrious. Yeah, especially the English connotation of a weasel is somebody who's, is not straightforward. They weasel. So Hulda is somewhat less known. This was in the times of Yoshiyahu. Now what happened in the times of Yoshiyahu was that Yoshiyahu was one of the later kings of Israel. Towards the the end of the period of the Beit Rishon, towards the end of the first temple, and it said, and what significant happened during his time was that the Torah had been very much neglected among the Jews for a long time, and during the times of Yoshiyahu, that's why it's already in the second book of Kings, chapter 22. It's towards the end of the story. So in the times of Yoshiyahu, there was a renaissance of Jewish life again, where the Torah had not been seen, had not been read by the king his entire life, and then one day they find an old copy of the Sefer Torah. He starts reading and he says, "Oh my God, we're not doing any of these laws. We're not living according to what the Hashem told us, and all of these klalot, all of these curses are going to befall us. We're going to fall into the hands of our enemies, and we're going to be exiled, and all these terrible things are going to happen because we're not following the Torah. We better get our act together right away." And so, after hearing the Torah, what does he do? So he does something very interesting, and this is on the second side of the last page. It says that Chilkiyahu, the Kohen Gadol, said to Shaphan the secretary, "I found the scroll of the Torah in the house of Hashem. Chilkiyahu gave the scroll to Shaphan, who read it. Then Shaphan the secretary went back to the king and gave the king the report. Your servants have poured out the money found in the house and handed it over to the people because they were actually renovating the Beit HaMikdash. Isn't it funny to renovate the Beit HaMikdash without ever having read the Sefer Torah before? Okay, it's like people today. Many people, let's say, they haven't really learned Torah, they haven't had a Jewish education, but they recognize, the synagogue, let's say, or Jewish institutions are very important, so they contribute to Jewish institutions. People are contributing money for the upkeep of the Beit HaMikdash. That doesn't mean they ever read a pasuk in their life, maybe. It doesn't necessarily go together. And so what happens? Shaphan, the secretary, tells the king, we have a scroll here. They read the scroll to him, and he's very shaken up. And what does he say? Go and consult Hashem for me, for the people and for all Yehudah in regard to what is written in the scroll which has been found. For Hashem must be furious at us since our ancestors did not listen to the words written in the scroll and didn't do everything written there that concerns us. In other words, he realized, oh my gosh, it's not just about rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. We're not following the covenant that we had with Hashem. We are in big trouble. We better do something to straighten this out right away. And so they go, and who do they go to? So Chilkiyahu the Kohen, Achikam, Achbor, Shaphan, and Asaya went to Hulda the prophetess, the wife of Shalom the son of Tikva, son of so on and so forth. She lived in it says here, the second quarter of Yerushalayim. That's a translation that he decides. It says Bamishneh. Bamishneh. Okay? Bamishneh is the word in Hebrew, which means something second, and spoke with her. What does Rashi say Bamishneh means? Bamishneh means, because it comes from the word Vishinantam Levanecha, to study Torah. What was she doing? She was in the Beit Midrash. She was right here. Right? She was in the Beit Midrash. That's what it says. Rashi says she was in the study hall. And there's a gate in the temple court called the Gate of Hulda, which was a place where they studied Torah. In other words, she was sitting in Yerushalayim teaching Torah, learning and teaching Torah. That's what Mishneh means. Mishneh means to reviewing the Torah. And they went to her. Rashi says, why did they go to Hulda? Our rabbi said that because a woman is more merciful than a man. He didn't go to Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu lived in the times of Yoshiyahu. He could have gone to Yirmiyahu, who was the head prophet. Everyone's heard of Jeremiah, right? Yirmiyahu. He was alive at the times of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Everybody knows who he is, right? So in the times of Yirmiyahu, who would you go to if you had a question? You're the king of Israel. You go to Yirmiyahu. He doesn't go to him. He goes to Hulda. Why would he go to Hulda, the female prophetess? It says because Yirmiyahu would give him a harsher answer. A woman is going to be nicer. Another possibility is Yirmiyahu wasn't around. But it's very interesting, the first answer. Because women are more merciful. So what does that presuppose about Hulda?
Motherly.
She's motherly. She's going to give a feminine answer. She's not going to give an answer that's true. She's going to give a nice answer because she's going to be a sweet lady. She's going to give him a nice answer. So look at what she says. When they go to her, she told them, Hashem, the God of Israel, says, to tell the man who sent you to me, that Hashem says this, I am going to bring calamity on this place and its inhabitants. Everywhere in the scroll the king of Yehudah has read, because they have abandoned me and offered to other gods in order to provoke me with everything they do. Okay, therefore my anger will burn against this place and will not be quenched. But you are to tell the king of Yehudah, who sent you to consult Hashem, that Hashem also says this, in regard to the words you have heard, because your heart was tender, you humbled yourself before Hashem, so therefore it's not going to happen basically in your time. You're going to have peace in your time. Things will go bad after you die. That's what it says. But it's very interesting. When she responds, what does she call the king? The man who sent you to me. Is that a respectful way to call the king? Not really. Very far from it. The man, it's like saying, the guy who sent you to me. You mean the king of our entire country? That guy? That man? She should say the king. She doesn't say that. She says, tell the man who sent you to me that I'm going to bring calamity upon this place and it's going to be destroyed and it's going to be, there's going to be devastation. But then, she says, but tell the king of Yehudah who sent you to consult Hashem, that Hashem says, because you humbled yourself, I'm going to be nice to you. And why does Hulda say this? Two answers. Why two answers? Because why did the king, why did Yoshiyahu go? Why did he send a messenger to Hulda? Because he wanted a nice, feminine, sweet answer, right? He thought she was going to give him an answer based on her gender, not based on the truth. And so what does she say? Tell the man who sent you to me. Why did she call him the man? Because the reason that he sent them to her was because she was a woman. So she says, tell the man who sent you to me that no, Hashem is going to destroy this place. Meaning, she gives a very unfeminine answer. Right? No, you're not going to get a girly answer out of me. The answer is the place is going to be destroyed. Because exactly what Hashem said is going to come to pass. But then she says, tell the king of Yehudah. Now she speaks about him with respect. Tell the king of Yehuda who sent you to inquire from Hashem, to consult Hashem, that Hashem is going to be merciful to him because he humbled himself. Meaning, I'm not the one. I'm not going to base it on my gender, be nice to you, give you a nice, friendly answer because I'm a girl. It doesn't work like that. I'm going to tell you the truth. As a man condescendingly sending you to a woman thinking the woman is going to give you a nicer answer, I say, no, the place is going to be destroyed. I'm not going to give you a nice answer. But as the king of Yehuda, who is sending messengers to ask the word of Hashem, not of me, a girl, not based on my gender, Hashem says, because you did the right thing in humbling yourself, I'm going to give you an extension. I'm not going to destroy Yerushalayim in your days. It's going to last past, you're going to go to the grave in peace. So what's the idea here? The idea is, Hulda is somebody, again, who breaks stereotypes, right? Just like Devorah is breaking a stereotype, Yoshiyahu has a stereotype about how a female prophetess is going to respond differently than a male one. Oh, a female one is going to be much softer, much easier, much more merciful. What does she say? No. Tell the man who sent you, meaning the man who condescendingly thinks that I, as a woman prophet, is going to give him an easier answer because I'm a woman. Tell him, no, I'm giving you the toughest answer. The place is going to be destroyed. There's not going to be any mercy and it's going to be devastated. But as the king of Yehuda, who's asking from Hashem, Hashem says that you will have a reprieve in your days. It won't be destroyed. So you see, this is a little bit of a feminist quality to it. In other words, she's saying, listen, as a representative of Hashem, it doesn't matter man or woman, I speak the truth. Don't think because I'm a woman I'm going to give you a softer answer. I'm not going to be truthful to you. And don't condescend me as a man thinking that I, as a woman, am going to give you the answer you want to hear because I'm a woman. No, on the contrary, as a woman I say, to heck with you. And on behalf of Hashem I say, He'll give you mercy because you humbled yourself. So you see that Hulda is going against what the somewhat condescending attitude of the king was, assuming he would get an answer he wanted to hear from a woman when she speaks the truth. And that's similar to Devorah in terms of breaking out of the stereotypes of a woman being a weaker figure or a more passive figure, being a very active and assertive figure, speaking the truth of Torah. We don't believe that truth is gendered, that somehow there's a difference between a female Torah and a male Torah, that there's something different between a female Navi and a male Navi and a female Neviah. There's no difference in the truth that they speak. There's not going to be any difference in the message that they give. They're going to represent Hashem equally well. In that sense, we are an egalitarian religion. When it comes to Torah, we don't believe that women have one truth and men have a different truth. If you go to a female prophetess, you're going to get a different answer. If you go to a male one, you're going to get a different answer. No, we believe that the truth is one. And that's what Hulda is trying to correct. Don't condescend me thinking I'm going to give you an easy answer because I'm a woman. I'm still going to speak the truth. And if there's any easy answer, where is it going to come from? Not from me as a woman. It's going to come from Hashem. That's the address. Yes?
That's actually a really big and important point. How come she's not a well-known? Maybe I just didn't learn about her?
Yeah, I mean, because she only has a cameo in like the book of Melachim Bet towards the end, that she's like only briefly mentioned here. In the whole Tanakh, she's only mentioned very briefly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And so she doesn't play a huge role. But that's the whole point. She's sitting and learning. She's teaching her own students learning. And she knows, why did the king come to me for an answer? Oh, why would he come to me? I'm not the main leader of the Jewish people right now. I happen to be a prophetess. Why is he coming to me? Oh, it's because I'm a woman. Because he wants to get an answer that he thinks that is going to be the answer that he wants to hear. So yeah, she's a very strong personality in that way. But she's a lesser known personality because she wasn't at the center of politics. She was doing her own thing. She was sitting and learning, basically, and teaching and leading in her own way, but not on the national, not on the national stage, basically. So she's lesser known. Unfortunately, we don't know much about her because of that. And actually, the Chachamim again criticize her, just like they criticized Devorah for coming out and saying everything was horrible until I came. And they said, "Hey, wait a second, you shouldn't speak like that. That's a little bit too much." They also criticized Hulda for being a little bit harsh, more harsh than necessary in the way that she addresses the king. When she responds to him, it's a little bit antagonistic. Her tone is a little antagonistic. Her point is well taken. So I think that the answer, we should, like anything in Tanakh, if a Navi says it, obviously there's a truth behind it. She's sending a message. Could she have softened her tone a little bit and been more respectful? Maybe. It's like when it says Shmuel the prophet, when they said to him, I'm looking for the Navi, he said, I'm the Ro'eh, I am the Navi, I'm the one. So they said because he said that, he was punished later. That when the sons of Yishai came, he couldn't tell which one was going to be the king. And Hashem said, I thought you were the seer. I thought you were so smart. How come you can't tell which is the right one? Right? So again, it's not that Shmuel was arrogant, but his language sounded a little bit self-aggrandizing, even though it was true. He was the Navi. But the way that he said it sounded like a sense of entitlement. He should have been more sensitive in his language. So maybe Hulda could have been a little bit more sensitive with her language and not been as outright disrespectful towards the king, but the point is still true. The point is still well taken, that you shouldn't go to somebody thinking that a teacher of Torah is going to give you an answer that you want because, they're nicer, they're softer, they're easier, because they're a woman. They're going to give you an answer that you want. No, when it comes to truth, truth is truth. And men and women, they both are going to be equal in that. And so she's a really cool character. It is unfortunate that we don't know more about her, we don't learn more about her, because she's only mentioned in this little vignette here, and we don't get to hear much more. But she's pretty impressive nonetheless. That's why I tacked her onto the story of Devorah, because she's similar to her in a way. But unfortunately, we don't have as much material about her. Any other